All right, we're good to go. All right. Hello and welcome to Spooky Action at a Distance television show with the Torn edition. This is going to be the second time we're doing this. It's going to be about 1 hour long, and if it makes it to TV, it'll be about 2 episodes. So if you're catching this, it'll say part 1 or part 2, wherever you're at. Just want to make sure everybody on here follow Spooky Action at a Distance on Facebook. On there, we do our monthly MUFON meetings for like UFO kind of stuff. And once in a while, we do like videos kind of like this, where they're kind of like longer topical videos. There's also a YouTube channel that has some uploads to watch on there. So that's all Spooky Action at a Distance. And then also, if you're in the Omaha area, or beyond, I guess we do Zoom, you can follow Torn on Facebook. That's Torn with a question mark at the end of it, all caps. There we do weekly religious discussion meetings here in Omaha at the CEC, but we also have a link for Zoom. So yeah, you can tune in for those. And I want to start off with what this here is all about. So this discussion's been set up a little bit differently than I've done in the past, where I ask everyone to submit positions and questions beforehand. And then what we did is we all voted on these questions and statements to see what are kind of interesting. And basically, for each one that got the highest votes per person, those are the questions that we're going to be going over, questions and statements, basically. This process was designed to pull out kind of topics that seemed the most discussable among the guests, the most interest between us. And I'm calling it the SAD method, so that's going to be patented. Nobody steal that. The reason I'm laying this all out is because I kind of learned over the past year that it's useful to make plans on how to do something and then evaluate them for better or worse to kind of improve, so you can iterate those plans for improvement. One of those plans is using a script to make sure that everything that needs to be said is said. Hence, I'm reading from a script and usually I just wing these things and don't say anything like that. A few issues that I come across this time is that, one, we didn't have a lot of time to set up because Steve was leaving for vacation here, so I just rushed this along, so it might be a little choppy here or there.
You want to blame Steve?
I'm blaming Steve, so okay. Any problems, email Steve. And another thing is, if somebody has like the same topic, so one of us was objective truth that everybody seemed interested in, multiple people put those down there. I didn't really plan for that. I'm like, well...
I only did it because you did it.
Yeah, I think everybody has their own statement on it. So I didn't plan on that, and I didn't plan if topics got tied, which we had one that got tied, but it was between, I think it was on Williams, objective truth and your other one. So I'm like, okay. We're already going to do objective truth, so I scrapped the other one. With that, let's do introductions. So we're going to do like name, educational background, religious affiliation. I'll start with myself. I'm Kyle Finley. Educational background, I have an undergrad in Native American Studies, computer engineering, information assurance, and it's a multidisciplinary degree, so I could have got like mathematics or religious studies or philosophy, well-rounded for that. And my master's, I'm doing IT innovation at the moment, so that's going to be done in about a year's time. On religious affiliation, I always say I kind of follow the Chinese Trinity, which is like Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism, and then religiously, I'd be kind of agnostic when it comes to like deciding there's a God or not. And so then I'll go with William.
Hi, my name is William. My educational background, I'm an undergraduate. I've got one class left, and then I'll have a bachelor's in math education. And then I'll be having my teaching certificate as well. Other than that, though, no letters behind my name. And my religious background, I was raised Catholic. Now I'm a staunch atheist, skeptic, whatever you want to call it, agnostic, whatever it is. Yeah, that's my position. Just kind of false until proven true, I guess. That's me. Hand it over to Steve.
I'm Steve. Education. I went to University of Nebraska-Lincoln with a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology and philosophy. Figured out nobody would pay me to sit around and think a lot, and so got a marketable degree in social work. So I have a master's degree in social work from this institution here at UNO. And let's see, religious affiliation. Technically, I think I'm a member of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod at a local church, but I can't say that any of my beliefs kind of line up with that. I once made a list of all the different positions I've held, and I've come up with 12 in the past that included atheism along the way, with everything Kyle mentioned and stuff like that. So I'm still on my hunt and open to anything.
All right, we'll shoot it to Jim.
All right, my name is Jim, and I have an undergraduate degree from UNO, a Bachelor of General Studies with a major in religion and a minor in history. And I have a master's degree in classics, classical Greek and Latin, and classical religion and philosophy studies. And then I have a doctorate in law from Creighton. And my religious persuasion would be, in general, evangelical Protestant Christian. And I'm surprised. I didn't know that you were a Missouri Synod. I never would have guessed, because I had a lot of experience with a lot of Missouri Synods. You just seem so much freer and nicer than Missouri Synod people, I have to tell you.
Wow, shooting shots off right at the beginning.
Well, let me say this. I went to a funeral yesterday that was Missouri Synod, and it was all the liturgy straight up. There's no deviation from it. But the church that my wife is a member of primarily, I go there because I wanted to raise my kids in a faith, felt value in that.
Sure.
And so I don't have any other alternatives, so let's go with the Lutheran Church. And it's one of those mega churches, so there's big screens and loud music and stuff like that, and they don't really follow what I would say the liturgy until the very end when he holds up and makes the sign of the cross and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Sorry. Deviation. There we
No,
go.
it's all good.
Oh, yeah.
You're all good. Okay, so we're going to do kind of like opening statements on each one of these positions. We'll do that without any interruptions, and then I'll allow interruptions when you start asking questions, back and forth. I don't think we're going to have any issue here, but for the future, I'm just setting this in stone. Don't try to like shut somebody down if they're, with like multiple interruptions. So if you ask them a question and then they start to deviate off of something you want them to answer, it's totally fine to interrupt because we only have a limited time to do this. So I kind of want to, get to the bottom of certain things.
So interruptions allowed unless they're not?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
This is mainly due to the time constraints, and I don't want anybody to feel bad about it. So any questions before we start? 3 seconds. Okay, nothing. Starting with William here. Now this is support statement is one that I filled in for him that everybody seemed to like.
Yeah.
But he said he agreed to it. So the support statement for William was religion does more harm than good. So we're getting right into the gates here.
I think it's a pretty easy statement to defend because you could start off like looking at like the history of various religions, and that there's like a lot of turmoil that wouldn't have come from a secular source, like say the witch trials. Like you couldn't really come up with that unless you had some kind of supernatural or superstitious belief like behind it. There's no real justification. And you could look at various other holy wars and those things, and that's all in the past. Maybe you want to say let's not talk about the history, let's talk about what's going on today. I still think it's a pretty defensible claim, because really any of the good that religion does today can be got from a secular source. There's like a lot of religious charity, there's a lot of religious hospitals that are built and so on and so forth, but none of these things have religion as an intrinsic component to it. So you can get these goods from other places, but they do allow for evils, bads that that couldn't have been gotten without religion, like genital mutilation, for example, is something that really only comes from religious communities. There's not really a secular source for that. I think the goods that it does provide are negligible and can kind of be thought of as kind of a placebo in some cases. If you pray and you get healed, how do we really tell if that's a good that was given by religion or if that was a good that was kind of begotten by the circumstance? And there may be a case for a certain sense of internal fulfillment. Maybe there's some studies that say that people who convert to one religion or another feel more fulfilled internally. I think that's really hard to measure, but I think in the ways that are kind of easy to measure, we can see religion has done a lot of harm. Yeah, I think I'll kind of open it up to questions. That's kind of my vague point.
Okay, yeah, I had one thing I wanted to kind of like back up. The one idea that you said before that stuck with me was the idea that in believing in something without facts and evidence leads us to believe in more things without facts and evidence. Is that kind of...
Oh, yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's totally like what I was saying with like the witch trials. I mean, like if you believe that there really is like this supernatural kind of theater that's happening around you, you find the supernatural like in everywhere you look. And if you look at things like the witch trials from maybe a more secular lens, you might see it as like, oh, well, these are the people in power who want to shift blame onto a weak group of people, namely like women in the 1700s, and they kind of get away with it by casting blame on others. But yeah, I think I would still definitely support what I said earlier that you have mentioned. When you believe in one kind of mystical thinking kind of thing, it just opens up a whole panacea of other beliefs that kind of can come along with it. Yeah, and I think that's a dangerous game to play.
All right, so that's why I got two of the most brilliant
Okay.
minds here to combat it. I'll start with Steve first. Jim's already kind of done to this before, so I want to throw Steve into the fire. But if you don't have anything you want to say, you can always pass. I don't mind.
And I guess I'd say I don't want to be difficult.
You can be difficult.
But just the phrasing of your statement, religion does more harm than good. You listed off a number of harms, you listed off a number of goods. How did you make the calculus over harm versus good? How did you arrive at
Sure.
You don't understand the mathematics of it.
So like, personal fulfillment has a very, I mean, it's pretty high up on the like hierarchy of needs. But kind of as you move up the hierarchy of needs, kind of the what's the word I'm looking for? There is like diminishing returns, I would say. So, you can have this personal fulfillment, and that is kind of like the frosting on the cake. But if you don't have, those bottom layers, like it's no good. And so when I compare things like personal fulfillment and like the witch trials, I think, burning somebody at the stake can be an obvious example of something that's worse, like in badness, than like personal fulfillment is in goodness. I don't know if there's a particular calculus there. I am a math major, but I can't show you any arithmetic there that says, one is worse than the other.
What kind of math
But,
major
Or
are
you have kind of a greater than sign.
Yeah.
Their harm is greater than.
I'm thinking like,
good.
what's the best good that could come from religion? And does it counteract burning somebody alive, one person alive?
Well, I'll pause you there then. One more thing, and then I'll let you go, Jim. Do you account for any of the good that could have come from the religious beliefs that have enabled us to develop security and safety and social cohesion and survival and hope and, as you described, fulfillment on Maslow's hierarchy of needs? By the way, that's not one of Maslow's hierarchy of
Oh, okay.
on there.
Got me.
But that was just mean. I guess on balance, at this stage of the game right now, does religion do more harm than good? Or are you giving religion the weight of nothingness, I guess, when it comes to throughout the history of humankind and our religious proclivities and the things that help us strive to find meaning and purpose and a sense of transcendence that could drive us to have good reason, all these things that maybe would have led up to and including the scientific method that was arrived at basically as a result of the intelligibility of the universe that sort of arrived at the scientific method. So mostly it's a question about can you give a little credit to the fact that we are sitting now in a pretty nice looking building and are in relative safety and security.
If I'm understanding, what you're saying correctly, I do think that a bad explanation is better than no explanation at all. I think, like homeopathy is better than no medicine at all. Even in the early days of medicine, homeopathy was more effective than actual scientific medicine. Like, there was a point in time where that was worse than nothing. And I think having, a belief that, when you hear a rustling in the bushes, running away is the better thing to do, even if there's not really anything there, just from a survival standpoint. And I can appreciate what you're saying about there being a certain survival adaptation advantage to having these, maybe supernatural beliefs or, that can create some kind of bonding between people and might have some kind of survival advantages. I hear that. I also think that the tools that we have grown from those humble beginnings have kind of had their time to thrive, and that they've kind of secularized themselves in the process and have, for the most part, like shut off a lot of those supernatural beliefs and a lot of those, kind of, I don't want to be mean, but like the kind of like the woo that comes along with it isn't really as necessary. And any source of good that comes from that religious place can be also gotten from a secular good. It may have had those beginnings inside of religion, but when you go back far enough, everybody on earth was religious. So, I mean, if you say like, so the scientific methods say maybe came out of a place of religion, I would have a hard time disagreeing because everybody at the time is religious. So, the person who invents the scientific method has to be religious. But I would also have a hard time agreeing because I think a lot of the things that, makes the scientific method work, none of them are religion. None of them are faith. None of them are, these types of things that we associate with religion most of the time.
It's going to play into some of their next points. Go ahead, Jim, though. You'll be up next.
So can I ask questions or I just kind of give a response back? What do you want me to do?
Yeah, you can ask questions or give a response back, whatever you would like to do.
Okay. All right. I'll do a two-sided or a two-point response back. First and foremost, being an atheist, William, I can understand your position on this, and I find it to be very reasonable if, in fact, there's no truth in religion. Let's say, for example, if Islam was in fact true, and there is an eternal afterlife, and the only way to achieve a positive experience in the eternal afterlife is to have submitted to Allah through Muhammad. So that would certainly be an eternal benefit for people that would be available. So it presupposes your position, which is fine. That's why I said it's reasonable to presuppose that. But if in fact your position is wrong, then in fact there could be some rather large-sized benefits to people in the afterlife. Secondly, I want to say that even given atheism and that all the religious positions are incorrect, why did you hear this?
It's a sign.
Yeah, okay, he stopped it. Even given, if I agree with the position that there is no afterlife and no religions are true, I believe that there is an awful lot of research that's been done to show that there is a temporal benefit to having religious beliefs. Certainly there have been a lot of downsides to it, those are inarguable, but there have been a lot of temporal benefits, including things like having a special sense of community, which includes having people of like-mindedness, that it really goes, the religious fellowship is different than any other kind of fellowship, and it gives a community that produces very positive psychological effects in people. So that would be one of them. Also, just simple things like having a belief in something outside of yourself has shown, again, statistically through studies, that it can give you a sense of peace, that it can give you a way to handle problems in your life, stress, all those sorts of things. And the bottom line is, even if there's no religion, if I'll make up a guy Bob, if Bob believes in his faith, and his faith then gives him the strength to find peace through a difficult time in his life, then I would say that religion had temporal benefit in his life. And those sorts of things do, in fact, occur in many, many religions. And so there are many psychological benefits that people accrue to them because of their religious beliefs. That's all.
All right. Yeah, I do kind of want to respond to a few of those points. So the first point, I'm assuming I'm correct by assuming that there's no afterlife. Okay, fair enough. But if I take the theist perspective and I assume that there is an afterlife, the question then becomes which one, right? And there's many mutually exclusive afterlives, and there's no clear way to know that acting in any particular way will give me a particularly good afterlife, other than just believing whatever religion I happen to be. So I think it kind of breaks down if you want to bring in the afterlife to it. But even if we're setting that point aside for the afterlife point aside, we can also just analyze the mutual exclusivity of religions in the first place. Because there are so many mutually exclusive religions, we kind of have to conclude that at least most of them are wrong. So at the very least, there's a lot of religions, most religions, are spreading falsehoods. So at the very least, we've got a lot of religions that are spreading a lot of untrue things around, even if you believe that, one of them is in fact true. And I think this is kind of an asymmetry when it comes to like the religious versus non-religious perspective, because, we don't have one particular religion that stands out amongst the rest. They all have very similar lines of reasoning and evidence for their various conclusions. Maybe if there was one particular religion that made a lot of falsifiable claims that ended up being true, that could, place it above the rest. But none of them tend to stand out in that way. At least, maybe not to me. Maybe there's some evidence that one of our other folks will bring up. But I don't think going back to the sense of peace and the psychological benefits, I think you're ignoring a lot of psychological detriments that come with the belief of religion. So taking Christianity, for instance, this is something I hear a lot at Torn, there's this belief that every single person, by virtue of being, deserves eternal torment in hell. They deserve eternal punishment. I think that's a very psychologically detrimental belief to have, and can cause a lot of negative side effects if you constantly think that you are, not worthy of, or let me rephrase this. If you think you are worthy of, eternal torture and damnation, and taught to fear this God, this thing that you also have to love, there's a lot of negative effects that religion can have psychologically. So I think, if we want to make this point about, the sense of peace and the benefits, I think there's a symmetrical argument there to say that there's equally detriments on the other side. So I don't know how much ground that gets you. Kyle, do you have any questions or comments?
Anybody want to respond to that? Or
Oh, yeah.
Jim?
I'm good.
One other thing, what we shouldn't do in one of these things is point somebody else to a different debate or a discussion.
Sure.
But I've made it a habit to listen to theist-atheist debates, often on YouTube. Perhaps you do as well.
We're joining the ranks.
I would point one out, the debate between Matt Dillahunty and Michael Jones of Inspiring Philosophy that addresses this particular topic, and the research that was cited in that one was abundantly clear that there's a difference between intrinsic religiosity insofar as how it has been researched by psychologists and social psychologists versus intrinsic. Did I say extrinsic? Extrinsic. Intrinsic religiosity. I'm not here. Well, let's see. Let's describe extrinsic religiosity as I'm here for the community, I'm here for the social aspect, I'm here for the maybe recognition, I'm here for other kind of social benefits. Whereas intrinsic religiosity is I'm here to really do my best at discovering this faith and what it means and how it can help me improve the life of myself and my family. I really want to know what the truth is. I am pursuing this particular religion for intrinsic purposes. Those are that type of intrinsic religiosity shows marked benefits compared to extrinsic religiosity, far and away above any other sort of set of beliefs, including atheism, agnosticism, the religious nuns and things like that. Intrinsic religiosity, at least in terms of research and evidence, far and away surpasses in terms of health benefits, the things that Jim mentioned. It was an interesting debate. I didn't know that there was many things
So,
cited.
if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, if you differentiate between extrinsic religiosity, which is being religious for the social aspects or the like social
You're
benefits.
not really deep into the theology at all and whether it's true.
Uh-huh.
Whereas someone with intrinsic religiosity is the one who really wants to discover the truth and follow the teachings and use the doctrine, the instruction, the spiritual practices, and those things, take them at full faith and value in order to improve their lives and the lives of others.
So if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, this study from the debate, I haven't seen the debate, but or the study for that matter, but what I'm understanding is vaguely like, regardless of the religion, the intrinsic religiosity is beneficial?
Correct. This didn't distinguish among Kyle and his Buddhism over there, his Taoism. That could be one. It wasn't exclusive, although research, at least in Western cultures, primarily what you have are the Abrahamic religions, but it didn't differentiate between or among any of those as much as they were studied more because more people are associated with those religions in Western culture.
Okay. Interesting point.
And it wasn't a study, it was meta-analysis studies. So
okay.
Oh, well, then you know it's
40
true.
studies and all of those. So it was compelling. I guess worth checking out.
Yeah, I that is an interesting point. I guess I would kind of have to fall back on the point that I made about these religions being mutually exclusive. Maybe people are getting intrinsic benefit from it, but if at the end of the day the claims are not true, isn't that a harm that we're actually having as a whole? You know, if people.
I would say that's not a harm from having a religion. That's metaphysically that's a harm because of the nature of the universe. It's not because of the religion itself. If there's only one religion that's true, it's just because of that there would be the problem, not the nature of the religion, or the religion itself brought that harm. It was just because there's only one that's right.
Kyle, did you have something? I think I cut you off.
No, I was just gonna get moving on here. We spent about 20 minutes just on that one. We might just do the support statements to go through this.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so the next one is for you, Jim. For your support statement, we had faith is the default mental state for most of what we hold to be true. So go ahead and give a support opening statement for that.
Okay. The well-worn phrase "seeing is believing" is pretty darn common, and I think it's an incorrect position. I think actually it should be "seeing is knowing." But either way, I don't really care what kind of words people use for that. But most of us have a whole gamut of information in our heads, and within all that, there are many, many items that we take as facts. We have a head full of facts, and how strongly you hold them is determined by how those facts came to you. And if in fact the information came to you firsthand, like seeing, then you would have, pretty confident that what is before you is real, and you can confidently hold that fact. If the information that's come to you has come by second hand, someone's told you about it, then there's always the possibility, at least there's more of a possibility that they're wrong than the possibility of you just looking at the thing. If I looked at a snake and said, there's a snake there, but if someone said to me, there's a snake over there, and I didn't see it, then the likelihood that there's a mistake or an error is increased because there's a second person who has to report on the fact. So when there's a secondary information like that, there's always a step away from confidence in how strongly we hold to it, that fact in our head. And my claim is that the number of facts that you have in your head and the ones that I have in my head are overwhelmingly there as a result of secondhand information. We didn't experience these things. We were told these things. We read them. We saw a YouTube video about them. We heard them on some audio thing, but we did not have any first-hand interaction with the facts. And that would be the case of everything that's in your head that is historically occurred before you have memory, the history of the universe. Any fact that is is about the universe that exists outside of your five senses, all of that has come to you secondhand. And my position is that that's actually the vast majority of facts in your head are those facts. Things that have occurred in the universe before we have memory, and things that have occurred since we have memory but are outside of our five senses. So we are required then, if we're going to take it as a fact, we're required to operate as if the source of information that we have about those events is trustworthy. And historically, the word for taking something to be factual when all you have is a secondhand source, that is called faith. You're taking it by faith. And so I'm saying that's the primary way all of us operate. Okay?
My question is faith objective or not objective?
You're using faith
Okay.
as defined not by the atheist, but as in the sense of trust or confidence. I have trust or confidence in these facts based
Trust or
on.
confidence in the secondary source that gave me the information.
And you think faith is the default, meaning if somebody tells you, if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, if somebody tells you a claim, I don't know, P, as for proposition, your default is to believe proposition P rather than to disbelieve.
No, I'm not saying that. The default position is when you compare all of the things you call facts in your head with other facts that came directly through your five senses. Maybe default position, not the right one, the right way to say it, but the overwhelming majority of facts that we have in our head, we've gotten by means of secondary sources, and so if we're going to accept it as factual, which we don't have to, But if we're going to accept it and bring it into our heads as fact, then we are doing that by an act of attributing trustworthiness to that source. So by definition, that is taking it by faith.
I guess I would only quibble with the word faith in thinking maybe a better word would be we have a lot of presuppositions. Perhaps that we presuppose that this is actually Coke mixed with Diet Coke. Now, why would I say that?
That was not my presupposition.
Somebody would have assumed it's something different, but I've got no reason to lie now. And why would I make up that I mixed it in? Because I have this idea that somehow mixing both of those is going to reduce my blood sugar for tomorrow morning's doctor's appointment, which it won't. But I'm going to take someone I know and trust with whom I have a relationship who told me this thing happened to them. I'm going to take that with a great deal of confidence, but it's not just not those ordinary things. It's if I'm going to see a source of something, I'd need to have good reason not to believe it. I'm going to assume these things are true. I'm going to presuppose it. I think just the word faith maybe is bothersome to so many because it's been redefined in some ways as belief without evidence, and it causes some confusion there. So
Right, but that's not the historical use of the word. The historical use of the word is simply just the word faith just means trust. I'm trusting someone. Historically, in the Western world, that's what it comes down to is trust. And so, if you want to, you can use any word you want. I don't care. We could use the word, pigeon. Makes no difference what the word is. My point is not what the word is. My point is that the vast majority of things in our head that we take as factual, we gained by giving some sort of trust to a secondary source. Mm-hmm. And they didn't come to us firsthand.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, kind of echoing what Steve was saying, I'm okay with admitting that, most of our knowledge comes from secondhand. I mean, we've evolved to be social creatures, so we kind of we've developed this dependence on each other. And, the vast amount of knowledge that we've spent the last few thousand years collecting, it's not going to fit into one brain. So, you kind of have to appeal to these, all the other people around us to some degree. I think it just comes down to, what you place your faith in that we really have the big quibble about. I mean, if you want to say faith is the same thing as trust, then fine. I have faith in the things that I trust. But I think putting faith in, holy texts that are a few thousand years old, where we don't really have access to any of the source documents or the anything that kind of goes along with the authors. Some of the authors we don't even know. I think that's a mighty tall order of trust that has not been paid for. I think. There's a lot of trust that just kind of gets thrown around, a lot of faith that gets thrown around that I think is unwise. And I think in the scientific field, we kind of recognize this with the concept of the null hypothesis, the idea that any correlation is spurious until proven that it's not. The null hypothesis is that, whatever data that you're looking at is a result of chance, of randomness, and you have to show that the null hypothesis has a certain small probability before you can reject it. And so I think, at least through the lens of statistics, we have some reason to believe that skepticism should be the default rather than faith. What do you say to that?
I would say that if that's what people want to operate on, but I believe that most of us do not and cannot operate as a skepticism as a default position, because then I think it mostly leaves us laying in bed in the morning and not getting up, because I can be skeptical about whether or not there is it's a new day, whether or not, I need to go to the bathroom, any of those things. And I think that your point is well taken about ancient texts. The farther you go back in history, the harder it is to, if and possibly impossible, to verify those. But we see the exact same process going on in a standard criminal court case. You have attorneys who are bringing information in and making claims that they have there's no evidence for it. Someone says something. Someone gets up on the stand and says, well, this person said this. And they have a whole process of simply saying, we can't recreate the crime scene, but we have things that we can bring forth, that we have to trust the process by which they were found and kept in a chain of custody, all those sorts of things, that we're going to trust the people who are giving testimony, all those sorts of things. But they're still required to, at the end, make a judgment about the facts of what happened. And most of that is done by faith. And to me, there's nothing wrong with that, because if you're not there, you have to make your judgments based on your best assessment of the information that's been brought to you, and how reliable were those people who brought that information to you.
I hear what you're saying, Jim, but I think with the court example, there is a default position. Because when you're in court, the default position is not guilty, because the prosecution has to meet their burden of proof. They have to actually show that, a crime has taken place, that the person that they're accusing is actually guilty of it. And I think that kind of mirrors the null hypothesis in a way, because the null hypothesis just says, there's no guilt of association. There's no presumption of guilt until that has actually been demonstrated. And when I say, faith, excuse me, let me back up for a second. When you say that faith is, the default, that the vast majority of our claims in our head, is it a new day? Do I need to go to the bathroom? All these things. I would agree with you that it's better from a standpoint of efficiency and getting through your life to just, believe those things as they come. I hear that. But whether that should be our default position when we are critically analyzing big cosmic claims such as, does God exist? Is there an afterlife? I think we have to, look at those with a lot higher scrutiny than do I have to go to the bathroom right now? I
agree completely.
And unless there's overwhelming amount of evidence that can bring us to the conclusion that God is guilty of existing, we are left with the default position that he is innocent of existing.
And I would say, if you were to take the example, I don't care, of the existence of Napoleon, we have the same problem. We have exactly the same problem. We have some things that occurred a long time ago, and we have people who went back and researched, and then these people put their research into books. And so we don't operate as if there was no Napoleon until I'm proven that there was one.
Right, but there's like a lot of evidence of Napoleon.
We operate as if this person is doing, reasonable work to discover what happened, but we are still yet at a place where we can make the decision in the final analysis: did this guy do good work? Was he a good historian? Was he somehow or other mistaken, or was he biased about things? We still have to do that, and I think that we have to do all those same things with religious texts. I don't see any difference in a religious text that whether or not you take something as factual from what it says in religious text, the same way whether or not I take that Napoleon existed as factual. The same process.
Well, we have decided the presumption of innocence is something rather new. There had been, you mentioned the witch trials, right? There's a point at which presumption of guilt, you have to prove yourself innocent. Somewhere along the line, I guess I'm using this to support your claim, Jim, that somehow a social learning process or an accumulation of wisdom over the years led us to the conclusion that we're going to agree that the presumption of innocence is the priority. The only, I think, other switch up, and I don't mean to change your language, I'm trying to help make your statement better. I know it was originally phrased as faith is the default mental state. I guess I'm thinking faith is the default way we accumulate factual knowledge, what we call facts. That seems to be pretty clear.
Okay.
If there's
I agree. I agree with the way you have restated it there.
if there's a mental state, whereas if there's a mental state that is the default, I would only say my default mental state, and I think I could fairly argue the default mental state of every human being is one of discontent. We're never happy where we're at. We're always on the move. We're all thinking about what we have to do afterwards and what's going to happen next, and that's kind of a default. So a look towards the future, the sense of what is coming, what do I need to prepare for, and I need to be on the move to be able to kind of attack the world, take on burdens.
Alrighty, well, I think we'll move to the next statement. So I'm going to go to Steve.
Oh,
There are stages of spiritual development.
yeah, I don't know why I picked this one.
You want to switch it?
You could go with your question
I
instead if
guess
you
I'll
want.
just point out because this is going to require everyone, I suppose, to do a lot of background research and knowledge. But maybe I'll just paint the picture for it. If you want to Google Wilber, Wilber, Combs, Combs, matrix, Wilber Combs matrix. Here's the idea that there are 4 states of consciousness. We can think of it as waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Those are sort of, that's a rough sketch of our 3 states of consciousness. Those can be likened to, in religious traditions, the gross world, the subtle world, which would be dreaming, the causal world is just a little bit more behind that, and then a non-dual state, which is what we would characterize as a religious or spiritual experience of awe and oneness and non-duality, I guess. If you think of those different 4 states, that's one part of the matrix, so that's one dimension. On the other dimension is kind of a history of humanity.
Is it like one of these?
Yes.
This one?
That's a good one.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm looking at the right thing.
If you look at then the history of humanity and William mentioned Maslow's hierarchy of needs before, and so there's sort of a sense of that goes on with our history. We started in our history to be primarily driven by survival. We then moved to a stage of needing security. We then moved to a stage of power, and these are, if you think of these as levels of spiritual development, who's the best person at survival? That would be someone who's our way of comprehending the universe and what we should do and what's the nature of reality would be based on survival only. Security, then to power, then to order, then maybe to success. I'm thinking of the 1980s, right? Success, community, synergy, and holism. There's different ways to phrase that. Archaic, magic, mythic. There's developmental psychology that would suggest that we all go through these same stages. As a young child, you would have sort of this fusion between, you can't tell between the self and the outside world. Developmental stages that developmental psychologists have looked at that would describe development in what we believe is from archaic to magic to mythical to rational to pluralistic. So the idea with the Wilber Combs matrix is, I think, an interesting way that can kind of help us locate. It's also a good way to have a bunch of arguments, but it's also something where you can plot, okay, I'm at the, I'm in the gross mental state or a waking state with nature, and I have a spiritual experience. That's going to be interpreted, that spiritual experience is going to be interpreted according to the level or stage of my spiritual development that I have attained to that point. If I believe that I had a mystical experience and it taught me how to be William the Conqueror, and I'm all about power, then I'm going to interpret this divine thing to me as the person, and it's all about power. Whereas if you can grapple with the idea that there are stages of spiritual development, not that unlike stages of human development and human cognition, then you have a different way of discussing religious matters and what spiritual experiences mean if they're interpreted according to the stage or level of development that a person has. So that's sort of what I meant by that. And I guess mostly it's pointing to you, hey, go look up this stuff. I think it's interesting. Does it help you? But
Yeah, I guess like I'm just kind of thinking about, because I've taken some like human development classes and whatnot. I'm thinking about these stages of development that I've heard in these other areas, and I want to like pin down what you mean by spiritual development, because like what would like the first stage be, or like what would be,
if you'd look at from infancy, before we have object permanence, the ability or theory of mind, object permanence is something, I don't think your cat, could you have a cat? Kyle, you used to have a cat.
I have two cats.
Dave's got a cat.
Somebody's got a cat. Say this is a cat treat. It's my pen that's on the table, and I cover up with paper. Cat's not going to know it's gone. It just appeared to the cat.
Yeah, okay, I will tell you, this is absolutely not true, because one of my cats tries to hide her food from the other cat. So I know they have object permanence, but I'll take you at your word for the conversation.
So if you look at human development, right, we're going to, and the thesis here is that according to your level of development, and if religion is defined as something you find of highest value, the most important thing of highest value, then if you're a 2-year-old and you're not comfortable with sharing, the person who demonstrates someone to emulate or a hero is going to be the one who has all the power. And so you will have your power religions that are based on conquering and dominance and whoever has that great strength. And the spiritual experience would be associated with that. I'm here to be in charge of everything. A magic or mythical belief, call it Santa Claus or something like that, that there's some animation that everything's alive, that this my lawnmower, when it doesn't start, there has some kind of, I anthropomorphize my lawnmower. I'm trying to answer your question the best way I can. I'm trying to think of how you would line up a history of what we had prized to have been most valuable as a definition of religion. What is of ultimate concern? Survival is of ultimate concern. Your spiritual experience would be interpreted according to that as whatever helps my group or me and my family survive and thrive. As we move towards a level more of pluralistic or community and synergy and things like that, what seems of ultimate concern is that which not only helps us survive, but thrive and cooperate and work together, and of what is of highest moral good is kind of different than, say, as you would compare it to power structures and the most orderly civilization. Okay, maybe Hitler was so, we always end up talking about Hitler whenever. Sorry, I did it.
Somebody does. I don't know.
Say Stalin or something like that.
Okay.
That you would define as control and order and that's the harmony that we're going to get. Is order and harmony is what we need. And that's going to be of ultimate concern for me. Anything that fulfills that, if I'm going to have a spiritual experience and that's what my stage of development is, it's going to be all about how can I best achieve order? Or if I'm at a power level, how can I best achieve power?
I hear what you're saying. I guess if I were to tweak your statement, kind of like how you were tweaking Jim's earlier, to make it to where I would agree with it. You know, I would agree humans have stages of psychological development, sociological development, you know, maybe, physiological development, obviously. But like, yeah, I can see all those. But when you say spiritual, I'm having trouble pinning down exactly what that is, because like I hear what you're saying about like, you know, when you're young, your moral beliefs are about, you know, like might makes right. I'm trying to avoid being punished. You know, I'm trying to get, you know, treats or whatever. But that kind of just sounds like Kohlberg's theory of moral development to me, more so than any kind of evidence of like any spiritual thing, like, or evidence of like a spirit at all. I don't know. Like when we pick these things apart, I don't know. I just have trouble seeing like a spirit there. I don't know if you want to respond to that, or if Kyle has something
I mean,
he
that
wants to
sounds
also
pretty
say.
good to me.
That's what you were
maybe hear
gonna say,
what Jim
maybe
has.
Jim has a response.
I guess I'm sort of thinking things similar to what William is saying there, that to me, to make the claim even that there are these spiritual stages, I would need to know what your definition of the spiritual dimension is, and how it operates, for me to say that I can identify stages of growth in there. Which is certainly a far bigger discussion than we're going to have tonight. But my question is, and I think I'm hearing you, that this is my problem, not yours, but it sounds like almost you're saying that some religious traditions seem to fit more in certain stages than other religious traditions. Is that what you're saying, or am I dead wrong?
No, I don't think I'm saying that. Although, yeah, I'm not going to go there. There's one thought that occurred to me when you said that, but that's it's a side note. I guess to answer the question about a religious or mystical spiritual experience, my definition of that would be, I wrote down some notes. It feels like, I'll describe it this way, it feels like a realization or a recognition that's accompanied by profound euphoria or awe of something that is ineffable, kind of this utter sense of oneness and no division between me and all that there is, to which we tend to ascribe to an agent, an outside agent of some kind, because the feeling that accompanies it is utter and profound gratitude as well. And so if a spiritual or religious or mystical experience has that sense of oneness, unity, there's no division between subject and object. It's not that I became God or anything like that. It's that I'm partaking in this sudden recognition and realization of absolute profound awe, to which I ascribe an agent to whom I am grateful to have had such experience. If that occurs at someone who is in a power sort of stage in what they feel is the most valuable, they're going to interpret that differently than someone who, say, their definition of what is a moral good is treat others the way you would want to be treated. That would be different than someone who, say, has a stage of moral development that I would call don't treat others the way you wouldn't want to be treated. Those are qualitatively different. And so I'm trying, I don't know if I'm answering the questions well enough. I'm trying to define what a spiritual experience is and suggest that that experience would be interpreted and communicated to others not unlike a bodhisattva vow, right? Here I'm enlightened, I had this profound experience. Now I have to go share it. Well, it's all about conquering. So I didn't want to bring up Muhammad.
Are you saying that?
Yes, my,
Go ahead, Jim.
We'll let Jim go.
go ahead, William.
I was just going to ask, are you saying that the experience, or like what the person takes away, really says something more about the person, the experiencer, than it does about anything else?
Precisely.
Gotcha.
And if that's the case, a person could have all of those, could have that experience and, have this profound gratitude and oneness, and yet that could all be understood as simply another psychological state. You're just putting it into the spiritual realm based on what things you're defining that make it spiritual. Sounds like that's what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying that there are certain things you feel that make it spiritual, whereas other things that you feel make it not spiritual.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe a side note would be I'm remembering Kyle has some Native American studies quite a bit. And so if you would look at an interpretation of a profound spiritual experience, perhaps for indigenous tribes, would be this: everything is here for us, everything has an animated spirit about it. The mountains, the trees, there's a nature mysticism that's qualitatively different than other forms of mysticism that, say, Buddhism would encounter. Those aren't different levels or stages. Those would just be different states of consciousness. If I had a profound utter realization that I'm one and I'm in the gross waking state, then everything, all these objects, and I would be completely one. If I'm sort of in the dream state, halfway between waking and dreaming, a state of consciousness, and I feel at one sort of in that moment, that's kind of profoundly different. Whereas in deep dreamless sleep, I don't know what that would look like. When you're not even aware that you're dreaming, that would be just kind of this absorption that's described in some religious tradition.
That would fit if you're talking about the four Eastern traditions or even Native American, but it wouldn't fit with any of the Abrahamic religions, because in the Abrahamic religions, you're not feeling oneness with the Creator. You're feeling, warmth and love and all those sort of things, but I'm not feeling like I am one with the Creator and the Creator is one with me. So that the oneness doesn't seem to work the same with the Abrahamic religions. And my last question is, are we quitting at 7:30 or 6:30 your time?
I was going to ask that. If we had 20 more minutes, I would finish out my point, but you got to make sure. I think, Steve, you had something that you're good? What about you, Jim?
Well, I was just going to go join Torn, but, I'm in no hurry. They're not waiting for me or anything.
Okay, well, we'll probably be going over there right after this anyway, so if it's okay with everybody, we'll do 20 minutes on objective truth.
Sure.
As best as I can do it, anyways.
Okay.
All right. So, Kyle Finley, the supporting statement that I went with is that there's no objective truth. And I got a perfect 20 points out of everybody who wanted to talk about this. Everybody put a 5. So, I don't think I'm super well versed in this. It's something that I've kind of been developing over, I'd say, like 16 years. I started off everything objective. It's in your face. It's obviously objective world. We live in an objective world. Case closed. But then over, I'd say, like 16 years, it just slowly kind of grew on me more and more. It seems like more and more things are subjective. So let me look at the time here. 55. Okay. Keeping track of these things. And I didn't bring my note card that had all the stuff I was going to talk about on it. But, so yeah, hopefully I lowered everybody's expectations enough that everybody here is way more versed in this, have heard all the arguments before, so I don't think I'm going to do anything new. But okay, so I'll start with what I would consider a definition for objective truth in a few statements. Before we were talking about faith and trust and first-hand, second-hand experiences. So I would start with first-hand experiences, something that we're experiencing right now, right in front of us. I don't think you can say that's an objective truth because you have nothing to measure it against. You don't know if you're tripping on mushrooms or something that you ate. You had some kind of weird mushrooms and all of a sudden you're having an experience, or if something's affecting your brain, maybe a cosmic ray hits your brain and you just had like a God experience or something, you know. We can't tell that on our own. We always look to somebody else to tell us what that experience means. Like if I seen it and then somebody else saw it, you think, well, that might be kind of objective. So I just want to make the point that I don't think one person alone can come to an objective truth. Secondhand experiences, right? So now we're reaching out to other people, multiple people getting together, see an event, you know, UFOs in the sky, or a ghost event, or something in front of us. The more people you have, the more you could say it might be an objective truth. But for it to be an objective truth to me, it's got to be 100% true. Everybody has to agree on what they saw. And that's what I'm saying I said is impossible. So that's why I made full caps, no objective truth. Because you're going to have to convince, for an objective truth in my world that I'm painting the definition of right now, you have to convince everybody of what you saw and they have to agree on it. So we had like the I think it's like a Scotsman thing that Jim talks about, where they all look in the box and they all see the same thing. They all got to come to the same conclusion. So I might see like an orb in front of me, and I might be able to agree with William and Steve, and we might all be able to agree on what we saw here. But is it going to be true that some tribesman in the Amazon rainforest is going to agree to what we saw and how we saw it? We're getting time.
Torn is knocking on the door.
But yeah, so we can agree on something that we see firsthand, but can secondhand people also agree on that objective truth? Can people who don't even speak like English, you know, like, so there's like a kid who was raised by wolves, right? That's in France or something. Is he going to be able to agree to that same objective truth? I'm saying this is getting very difficult. You know, is somebody who's raised with no socialization whatsoever going to be able to come to that same objective truth? So for everybody in the world to be able to come to the same thing, I think that's just impossible. There's just too many different viewpoints. It's always going to be that one guy who's going to disagree with you. So we might all believe the world is round, but what about the guy who's in the rocket ship flying up saying the earth is flat, and he's going to die with that belief? Are you ever going to be able to convince him that the earth is round, that it's an objective truth? I don't think so. Moving on, I want to talk about like science. So yeah, I'm a big science guy. Science is great. I don't think it comes to an objective truth. I think it slowly whittles away our assumptions over time. I don't think it's a pursuit for truth. I think it's a pursuit for like maybe accuracy or something like that. One example I'll use is DNA. If you believe in evolution or whatever, we can take a fly and we can manipulate the DNA so that it changes into something else. You know, it grows a leg, it grows a wing, whatever. This little tiny step. And then we can use induction and say, well, if we keep doing that over a long series of time, it'll become something else. That'd be an inductive proof, but that's not an objective truth. You know, that's just something we don't know for sure if that'll happen. Maybe at one point it'll just stop evolving. We don't know. But then you can take that and go backwards in time too. Like, so if it moves forward, it should be able to move backwards. That's, induction. But it doesn't prove that that's always been the case. God could have created the world 5 minutes ago and just put all these memories in our mind, and this is all just a pre-planned out dream. So how do we know that's not the objective truth and that evolution is the objective truth? We're taking it on faith, going back to Jim's point. Another example would be like universal laws of physics and stuff. So we study the laws, gravity, magnetism, and stuff like this. Seem to be true everywhere we go, but we don't know that in like one corner of the universe, if there's a 1 by 1 inch little square where all the laws of physics are broken. And maybe Steve goes there and Jim goes there and they see this with their eyes, and God's there telling them that no laws of physics exist in there, and they do experiments and they videotape it and they bring it back to me. I still can't tell that that's an objective truth, that there's no laws of physics in that one area, or that laws of physics exist everywhere. So like, to me, it seems very hard to come to the conclusion that there's an objective truth that everybody can agree on based on those two things. And just to wrap it up, just to wrap it up, the second half of this is I think it's kind of damaging to always be saying we have the objective truth, that evolution is 100% true, that I don't know, gravity exists everywhere. Because of these people, that Earth is round, right? So, like, to have conversations with people who live in these other, I'm going to call realities, because I'm coming from the point that there's only subjective truth. These people live in a reality where the Earth is not round. And if you're only using objective truth and just to say, you're dumb, you're not, the objective truth is the Earth is round, that just ends the conversation. You're not, connecting our realities together. And I think that should be the goal, is to connect people's realities together. And using the term objective truth just cuts people out, and then they just go their own way. So I think there's a damage being caused by that. So no questions. So that wraps it up.
right.
Yeah, we can all get moving on. They're calling us into the other room now. I'll go. No, we're going on. I'll start with you, Jim. Go ahead.
Okay. To me, what it seems to me that you've done, and I could be completely wrong here, but it seems to me like you said something. I'll give you an analogy. I'm going to define a truck, and a truck has it has a vehicle capable of carrying a payload, and it is the size of the Andromeda galaxy. The definition is so out there that there's no reason to even have the definition of truck. And so if you're going to define objective truth as something that every single human being in the universe agrees on, then of course there's not going to be objective truth. But to me, it's...
I'm glad. We need to stop there. You said no objective truth. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. The problem is that I mean, we all would agree with that. Okay, but I think the problem is you've extended the definition of objective truth so far, so that you've taken it off the table. But and then therefore by default the only other option is subjective truth. I think that a more reasonable definition of objective truth helps a whole lot, and that's by saying that objective truth would be those things which a large number of people, having looked at the same thing and come up with the same idea about what's going on. To me, that would be a reasonable objectivity. Which to me is what science is all about. Science is all about reasonable objectivity. Science operates as if they can never say something is absolutely true because they can't test everything. But they can say this is how we see it so far, and I think that it's perfectly fine for us to define that as a reasonable objective truth. That's all.
All right. I go to William. I figure you're
Can you
gonna
go to
be-
Steve? He had
I'll
some
go to
things. I'm
Steve.
still writing.
I'm going to
Oh,
Steve.
just provisionally true. That's the law of induction. That's how we reason. That's how science works. I guess the only exception that I guess one thing is, you inevitably, the more you commit to that, Kyle, the more you commit and dig in on the idea that there is no objective truth. It kind of would only lead you to solipsism. You could certainly doubt that I exist right here, right now. The only thing you have in front of you is what you can experience. Any fact is that which is occurring in your experience right now. The only other one is sort of an obscure French psychoanalyst reference, and I've got a couple Sam Harris examples, but Jacques Lacan is a French psychoanalyst, described how words have meaning, they're tied, and the one thing that you really can't have a subjective different interpretation of when it comes to words are names, such as Nixon. When I say Nixon, we all know who Nixon was and who we're referencing. That was in Sam Harris would describe there's a list of U.S. presidents that is objectively correct and a list of U.S. presidents that is not objectively correct. It's true that there are either an even or an odd number of hairs on your body right now. One of those things is objectively true. I've got no way of taking the time to bother with that, or that
Even.
Or I'll say that Slim Shady is also known as Eminem. Names like
So
that.
yeah, like I don't know what. So the even, like I'm thinking of the even or odd numbers of hairs on the body, right? Like that there's an objective count. Like if you count every one, you might come to either even or odd. But I don't know. I don't know. What if somebody comes to one and it's odd, and somebody comes to one and it's even? Is that so? How do you know what the objective truth is? Or maybe
how
they
do you
count.
know it?
Yeah.
Right.
And how is that useful?
I'm with you.
There's so many layers of like confusion in between. Like, well, what do you define as a hair? Maybe people count things differently, you know. And you're never going to be able to convince people otherwise that, oh, this is a hair has to be sticking above the skin for it to count. The ones that are under the skin don't count, or what, you know.
Well, if everything is subjective, that makes everything relative. You could go with that, except that some propositions are going to end up being more viable
yeah,
than
I'm
others.
totally.
The definition of a truck as, it was so wild, the Andromeda Galaxy, I still can't put it together exactly what that was, but as opposed to a truck is how we would define 4 wheels, it has a bed and back for storage, and it's a locomotive vehicle, stuff
Yeah,
like
I
that.
still think there's like statements that are useful. Like there's a useful statement for a truck and there's an unuseful statement for a truck. But is one objectively true? I don't think so. Like wherever you go, trucks are going to be defined differently. You know, it's like
Okay, I'm only putting you on guard for your solipsism that you're going to end up with.
All
And
right.
Don't treat people as
what
if
exactly is solipsism again?
I'm the only thing I can confirm is that I exist. And
Oh,
I'm
I don't
experiencing this
agree
right
with that either though. Because
You
like
don't
we
even
could
know
be,
if you exist.
yeah, we could be a simulation. This could just be a program running. We don't know.
How would you be fooled into thinking that you exist if you didn't?
If we were like a program, like an AI program existing in some kind of machine or something, maybe we're just going through.
But then you would exist as an AI.
Yeah, but like if you're thinking of like an individual as like a free will conscious agent, I guess I don't know.
Oh, I guess. Anyway, I'm gonna destroy your argument.
Okay.
In one mic
I'm
drop.
glad I went around. I
Well,
thought, I
probably
thought
not.
Jim
This-
was
this-
doing the bad word. You know,
This might just be a word game, but I think
it
it's
could
worth
be a
pointing
word
out.
game. I'm sure. you know.
So you think there's no objective truth? Is that itself an objective truth claim?
Oh, see, this is what I wrote down on my paper to have an argument ready for this. So I got it. It's just not with. I would say that this has to do with like some kind of categorization difference. I'm not super in the philosophy to like describe all this stuff, but I would say that it's not an objective truth that everything's subjective because I have to accept other people's realities where they think that the objective truth does exist. So I have to, like I'll just say Jim is an objective truth person. He believes in objective truth. I have to accept his reality. So there is objective truth in his reality, but not in like the meta universe, as how I see it, anyways.
Right. Okay. I hear what you're saying. To me, that kind of it's like objectivity doesn't mean anything at this point.
It
Because
means
if you're
something
saying
to other
if it's
people.
only true for someone else, that to me that's what subjectivity is.
Yeah,
Like when
yeah.
something's true only for some person. So if you say objectivity exists but only for Jim, I'm thinking, well, then it's not objective.
But it also exists for Steve, and probably for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think there probably is like an objective truth out there. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I thought I maybe had that mic drop game, but you had an answer for me.
That is
so
the best
I
I could come up with.
But yeah, it's like, are you aware that there's always uncertainty?
Are you aware that there's always... Well, see, that's the other thing for me is I think the world's mainly deterministic, so I don't believe in uncertain things happening, really.
Oh, you don't believe in any uncertainty. You know everything.
Not that I know everything, but that I think you can determine everything, kind of like the weather. Like, we can't predict the weather today, but if we had all the information, we should be able to predict it.
Like, let me bring this back to like what you were saying about the 1-inch cube that has no laws of physics.
Yeah.
Like, even if you had a video and all these things and you could go there, you still couldn't be certain that there's no laws of physics there. You couldn't know it.
Yeah, it could be
So
just an illusion.
there's always
right?
like some uncertainty, right?
There's always some... Well, in the subjective world, I'd say for sure, because like what I believe and what somebody else believes, we can't come to that conclusion. So I don't know...
Are you sure there's always?
I'm not sure if uncertain is the right word I would use for that.
Okay. Okay, that was
I'll-
the same kind of.
I'll write it.
I was
I'll write
going
it down, and I'll get back to you.
You
on
didn't
that.
let me get to the punchline because what I
Okay.
was trying to get you, I was trying to corner you a little
Yeah.
bit, saying if you're sure that there's always uncertainty, I would ask, are you certain? Because if you're certain that there's always uncertainty, you've kind of boxed yourself.
Yeah, that's
in.
why I think agnostic's a good position I take. There's some questions that we just can't answer, and I don't know if there is an answer. And even if there was an answer, I don't think we have access to it. So at that point, it's just like it's all out in the. But I think this here is something that we need to kind of like accept, as opposed to there is a truth. We can't find the truth. I have the truth. You need to have the truth. Kind of perspective.
Gotcha.
Nothing is, there's no objective truth, but we can keep it as a goal. Is that all right, Kyle? You okay with that?
Ooh, I don't.
Shoot for the moon,
That's what
land among the
that's the whole
stars
point of
philosophy.
the
It's
scientific
close.
method is to try and get as objective. And
Yeah, but I don't know. Objective truth. If that's something the goal I want to go for, useful information, I would say is a good goal. We want to collect useful information. But to say that that's an objective truth is to discount other people's beliefs completely. Such as God, right? There might be a God, there might not be a God. And to say that, evolution's 100% true or something might discount somebody's belief. And I feel like that's harmful in some ways.
Don't we any kind of claim you make about reality is going to be doing that on some level, like discounting.
Well, we're saying that this information might be more useful than other information, but we always leave it open that information can change. That information might be not useful in the future. Maybe it's only useful in this part of the universe, and we're going to go to a different part of the universe where there's different things affecting us.
Well, and I noticed you went from the useful and pragmatic piece of it to
I'm trying to stick to that.
to the morals and ethics about whether it's a good thing to override and say somebody else is wrong. We use kind of religious language that way when we move into discussions like that. I think we went from, well, if it's pragmatic, it's useful, if it can help us adapt and survive and move forward, and whatever other secular values that we want to have. It begs the question then, as we move towards religious language, are there objective morals and values and duties and things like that? You slipped in that direction. And I just wanted to point
We
out
may
that's-
want to wrap up now because we're pretty over time at this point.
Oh, we're
right?
I just want to.
7:30 that we're ending. Or?
We'll end at 7 here. I mean, we got 10 minutes.
We've got 3 episodes of sad right here, right?
Yeah, we can wrap it up here. I think we're basically, unless Jim had anything to say, I'll give you some time if you want to say something.
I wanted to say that, when I used to teach critical reasoning and I would teach about different theories of truth, one of them that was fairly popular and is still popular, but still very recent, is what's called the pragmatic theory of truth. And the pragmatic theory of truth basically asserts the possibility of there being objective reality that we can make truth claims about, but it also says that objective reality, the objective reality has to be able to have some pragmatic value. The claims that we make, if I make a claim that I can fit 1 million angels on the head of a pin, that claim has no real objective value, so therefore it would not be included into the set of true statements. So the pragmatic view includes sort of a judgment about the statements that you're making and the reality that they are talking about as a part of the truth claim. But still the pragmatic theory still takes that there is an objective reality out there. Now, as time has moved on in the last several decades, and we moved into particle physics, there's been a shift away from that simply because of the spooky action at a distance that occurs, that there's no objective truth. But still, they operate on that principle. Anything above that level, standard science operates as if there is objective truth, and but they just don't pursue anything that doesn't have any reasonable practical value. That's all.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up. Anybody, you want to do closing statements? People want to say stuff. What do you guys think of the debate? I want to go. I'll start with Jim. What do you think of this? Did it go well? Go bad? Like the questions?
Yeah, I thought it went very well. I was under the impression it was only going to last an hour, so I sort of wasn't ready for this. Not that that's a problem, but except that Andy's sitting with me in the car. It wasn't a problem, and the way you have it set up, I think, is perfectly fine. I think you did a fine job of moderating so that Will and I didn't interrupt each other too much.
Oh, thank you, Steve.
Well, either there were good topics, yeah, we went over, and either that means there were good topics and we chose correctly, we just need to choose fewer, or else next time we have to choose the same number of topics, just make them of very little interest so that we don't take much time to talk about them.
Yeah, I like the format. I think if I were to tweak it for next time, I would do everybody defending 2 statements. One that's kind of like the popular vote or whatever, and then one that the particular person wants to defend. I think that might lead for maybe a more interesting discussion, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I guess, and the main issue I had was, I thought it would be like 10 minutes per question, but we did about 20 minutes. But I mean, if the discussion's good, I'm like, we'll just go for it. So
We should have interrupted each other more. That would have solved the problem.
that would have made it last longer. That's how it goes. But I'll close it out here. Just want to do some shout outs for our Spooky Action at a Distance Facebook page. Make sure you follow us, and Torn on Facebook, and also on YouTube. And thanks for watching, and have a nice day. Everybody wave.
Like and subscribe.
See you later.